Hello again. This is Professor Kim Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Continuing some rendering demos I've been working on. Decided to do a demo also following up on the metal and cabochon demo I just completed. A tutorial. I decided to continue with a tutorial on how to paint hardstone. Hardstone would be materials like turquoise or lapis or coral. Malachite, those kinds of things. So this is how you would go about rendering those kinds of materials. The first thing you want to do is to simply render the dome or the cabochon, whether it's an oval or whatever shape it's going to be. In our usual fashion, going to lay in a base color. With a hardstone, you're not dealing with a highly translucent and reflective material. It's kind of like rendering polished plastic. Which makes it a good deal more straightforward. After putting in the base color, going to paint in the dark. Then going to paint in the light. This light color really representing the body color of your stone. Body color meaning the color that you think of when you think of the stone. For example, what I'm painting now would be turquoise. Turquoise, you think of a light blue. Okay. So there's the dark and the light. Core shadow, you do have. It is not as pronounced. Filled in a little too much there. And even this is too reflective. Alright? It's nice, but it's too reflective. So, To demonstrate correctly, I will repaint it. I have too much contrast going on. And when you're rendering these non-reflective materials, it's the contrast you don't want. So, the shaded area will be much less shaded. The highlight area was about, the lit area, light area, was about right. This shadow actually is about as dark as you're going to go. You will come in and do fill like we did before behind it. This will be, whereas this is the most typically your body color of the stone. This will often be the most intense color of your stone. Okay. Now what this is missing would be the highlight. And there's a reason I haven't put that in yet. And that reason is that if you have a material that has texture in it or other colors in it, you add the highlight last. So, pick this up. Bring it down. Now, this top example would be, we'll call it a Persian turquoise, which doesn't have any matrix. Matrix is the dark lines of primary rock that the turquoise is found in. I'm going to adjust the color on this just a little, so that it more reflects what an actual Persian turquoise would look like. Because I was painting with a southwestern turquoise in mind. So, now that we're going to do the now if I'm doing the Persian turquoise now, I will, since it doesn't have matrix, I will go ahead and add the highlight. that lower highlight I would make more subdued. Okay, that would give you your first turquoise. Now for the southwestern turquoise, I'm going to draw the matrix. And that matrix with its veins is a warm dark brown. To black color. How sophisticated you want to get with it would depend on the nature of the rendering, who it was for, whether they're waiting for it in the next room. Certainly where the matrix is in the light, it can get more of a brown and a lighter effect. And as it goes into the shadow, it can become more black. So by accenting it, depending on where it's located, I'm building some form into the matrix. And then, just like I did with the stone up above, now I would come in and add my highlight right on top of that matrix. Would actually probably make that second highlight a bit more of a wash, so that you can see some of the matrix behind it. And that will really suffice. I have decided I don't like that dot. So, were this in gouache, that would be a much more serious concern. I have to confess. On the computer, it's a series of undos. Decided to do that auxiliary highlight in a place where it wasn't so apparent, where it would conflict directly with the matrix. Since I have artistic license here, I can put that highlight wherever I want it. So if I choose to not put it somewhere where it's fighting me, that is okay. Okay? There. Turquoise with matrix. Malachite. It's going to be the same story. paint in a medium value. Bring in a shaded area. Bring in the highlight area. Not the highlight, the light. Highlight is a different thing altogether. If I'm going to fill in behind here, it will be with a fairly bright variation of the color. It's not going to be really apparent in shades this dark. Malachite is a dark green. Okay. Now I could continue beyond this with it, but since malachite is a highly featured or figured stone, it has a lot of detail on the surface. For me to be painting in that detail now, painting in the form right now, without having some of that detail in place, is just asking to paint over the work I've already completed later. Now, the detail on malachite is like concentric eye rings, and it is black. Wish I could tell you there was an easy way to do this, but there is not. Not a real shortcut available. I would not put the pattern centered. Since one of the features of malachite is that the rings, the lines that comprise the rings, are different thicknesses. For me, working on a computer, it's important that I don't paint them all at once. Using the same thickness of line. Some of these lines will be very fine. And very tight into one another. If you're not sure what malachite looks like and you have a malachite painting project, you would be well advised to get your reference Find a photograph of the stone. Okay, so you've painted in the pattern, and now you're going to bring the form in, just like you did with the matrix. Where these black lines are in the highlight area, it will help you achieve a believable form if you gray them somewhat so they are not as dark as they may be when they enter the shadows. How far you want to take that is up to you, and would once again depend on what the purpose of the rendering is. I've had renderings go into Christie's or Sotheby's catalogs in support of a piece. If this is going to be an illustration that's going to be published, then yes, you would take the time to very carefully build as much form as you could. And by the same token, where it's in the shadow, make sure that it's ink black. Okay? Having done that, now you can do your highlight. Start with a thin wash of white. You can put a little bit of the green in it, if you'd like. Just to create a kind of hazy highlight area over that whole region. And then come in with a fairly bold highlight. Perhaps not that bold. That second highlight could be a little more green. Don't care for that. And every stone's different. It has different needs, different requirements. The texture and the pattern on this stone make certain demands. Okay? I am going to put a slight reflected light around this stone for no other reason than I feel like it needs it. I wish I could tell you that there was a more scientific basis for that. But there isn't. As I've painted it, I've realized that it could use a little more. Okay, fine. Now for coral. Actually, let's do Jade. Jade Special. I'm going to do an Imperial Jade, which is the really, really good stuff. really good Imperial Jade is almost between a grass and an emerald green, and it can be translucent enough to read through. What makes it special as a hardstone material is that it is ever so slightly translucent. And that's important. You will run into that in hardstone. Things like chrysoprase, and Imperial Jade, they have a translucence to them. So the question becomes how to handle that convincingly. And the way you would handle that is to bring in your shading, your dark. There is no core shadow on this material, so to speak. And kind of your fill in between here. And that same fill color I'm going to use to create a hint of that darkening we get under the highlight on a cabochon transparent stone. It will not be as dark. Okay, now we have our lit area. That's too grassy. Not going to make much of a difference. That's actually pretty good what I put down for the lit area. These are not stones that you paint every day. So your normal recipes, as it were, aren't necessarily going to help you. Good reference will help you more than anything. I'm not using reference, but I've painted an awful lot of Imperial Jade in my time. I've painted a lot of carvings in it and what have you, so I have a sense of what it's like. I know how it feels in the hand. I know how it moves around the light within it. I have a sense of what I'm working with. After I've done that, now I'll come in. I will do that wash of a light color to create kind of a highlight zone. But not too much. And not too light. And into that zone, I will paint my highlight. Once again, I'm feeling the need for a little stronger reflected light on it. And in this case, I'm going to put just a little highlight along the rim, because there is something more transparent about them, something that is more like a cab. a transparent cab. That's how I would do Imperial Jade. Coral. It's again a good medium color. Now there are several colors of coral. There's an oxblood coral that's a dark red. There's an angel skin coral, which is barely pink. Very, very soft, lovely pink. This is going to be an in-between coral. All-purpose coral. Get my dark. Get my light. Fill in a little behind here with that richer color. Not so much a question of light or dark there as it is intensity. As I do this, I realize that the shadow color is probably a little too dark. Coral has almost a slight grain to the surface, and because it has that slight grain, it's a very soft effect. I have decided, however, that that was not really helping me. Once again, it's a material you don't paint every day. There isn't a recipe for it. You're going to come in and you're going to make it work. Have some good reference, or have the experience to know what the material looks like, how it behaves under light. Kind of all around reflected. This extra little line that I have here, I would take a wash of the light color and I would fade it. And then it was a very soft pink. Do that soft, washed, blurry kind of haloed highlight area. And with this particular cab, I would do some of the same coming in here. Perhaps not quite as bright, but the same idea. Not so much, because what that does is it makes the shadow once again look really overpowering. So just in one spot. maybe. Now put in my highlights. Coral. This big brown band is not making me happy. I've tried lightening it, I've tried doing all kinds of things with it. It's not making me happy. So, when that happens, instead of trying to change how light or dark it is, change the color, and not all the way across, and do it with a wash, thin paint, like you're doing a glaze on a colored stone, on a transparent faceted stone. Come in and just vary it. Because sometimes it's not the value that's bothering you, it's the fact that it's the same color. It's the same thing all the way across. And that gives it too much importance. Sometimes. So kind of finding it and losing it, letting it be dark, and then lightening it up. Yeah, that gave a softer effect. It made that big dark bar kind of go away and made it easier for me to live with it. And once again, it's a matter of looking at it and going, what do I want to do? Lapis. Lapis is a dark material. So I'm going to kind of break my rule about medium values. Good quality lapis can be very dark indeed. The dark. Oh, interesting. I'm trying to understand why I'm getting this strange pooling effect. Okay. There. Not sure what the program was doing there, other than giving me a headache. So, bring in the light. Okay. And that's really, I'll bring in some reflected light. It's very subtle. Okay. Pyrite, the gold flecks. You're going to actually use the same colors you would use to paint gold. You're going to use a yellow ochre. And actually I would take it a little oranger. Otherwise surrounded by the blue. It will look green. Vary the size and intensity of the dots. Some groupings very close together, some more sparse. Don't forget to get some around the edges. Be sure some are bigger than the others. And now the ones that are in the highlight are going to be fired up with a bright yellow. Not your highlight from your gold, but like the reflected light yellow, the mixture of your two yellows with a little pro white. You'll also tick up some of these that are along the edge in the reflected light because the pyrite would light up in the areas where the light hit it. Areas where it's not hitting it, leave it the color that you have it. Areas that are kind of in between, a more oranged, more vibrant but not too much lighter version. Okay? There. And now you're going to do what you did with the other cabs. You're going to create a wash, white or very light blue, to create kind of a high-lit region. And then you're going to come into that with your final highlights. Now I would like to add some reflected light here. It's a little iffy because I've already got the pyrite down. So any reflected light is going to kind of obliterate the pyrite dots. But it's okay. It's working. For reasons I don't quite understand, I want to put a subdued highlight dot there. Okay, fine. Lapis. All right. Now, I need to do 2 more. So, I need to do opal. Going to do a black opal on top and a white opal down below. Opals, a black opal, is a dark gray blue stone at its foundation, so that's how we're going to start painting it. Pretty much as dark as that lapis. Bring in the dark. And the light is going to be very subtle. That's enough. White opal. Tends to be a blue-green kind of a stone. Also very grayed down, though. The dark area, shadow. The light area. You notice on both of these, I did not spend nearly as much time developing them. And that's because I don't want the form to be the big story on these for a change. For these, it's the fire that you want to be the story. So, in the black opal. Red fire is what makes the most expensive red opal. I mean black opal, sorry. So it won't be the lion's share. Same is true for white opal. But you will see much more of our larger areas of blue. And the same is true here. And green. And this fire can actually lend its color to the stone. You can actually start to get in fact you often get an opal that looks greenish blue. You rarely get one that looks red. So the red pin fire, or the red, especially the large chunks of fire, are very unusual. Now in white opal, you'll also get sparks of yellow. Showing up. And to a lesser extent, you'll get some of that happening on the black as well. But not very often. It'll be very, very minor. Now, where you have areas that it's beginning to look very boring, very dull, I'm going to come in and add, brighter, lighter areas of fire. Now here's the thing. On the other stones where we had features like Matrix, or the rings on a Malachite, or the Pyrite even on a Lapis, the form really affected the fire, or the color, or the feature. So you would have it go dark and light and dark and light. The whole point with an opal is that these things seem to be internally illuminated. They tend to defy, if you're lucky and you own the opal, they tend to defy the form. Something can be very bright in the shadow, I wouldn't make them all bright in the shadow because that will kill your form for certain. Greens and blues are the safest ones to play with because almost all of your opals have a good representation of both of those colors in them. Go back to the red and orange. Okay, that's good enough. That gives the feeling of opal. Now we're going to go onto both of these and do what we've been doing so far, and that is to do a pale area, light blue in both of these cases, although considerably lighter on the white opal. And then we're going to come in and apply our highlight. It's a little too big. I like the idea of that highlight, but it needs to be softer. I'm not feeling the need for as much of a highlight here on the black opal. What I do feel the need for in the black opal is some reflected light around the top, particularly. That is too light, not intense enough, too big. I don't know as that served any real purpose at the end of the day. I don't think it helped. I don't think it's hurt anything. But I think it's extra labor that was unnecessary. On the white opal, do the same thing with white. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how you can paint these kinds of stones. Between watching these being done, you should have a sense of how you could approach any number of other hard stone materials. Okay? So that will conclude this tutorial.